look back, we try to put this in some kind of a framework, because we love frameworks, we like to think of the world in terms of frameworks. What might that framework look like? Well, let me give you a couple here. The first is what I call the uncertainty principle. The driving factor in so much of what we do, in how we make our investments, and how we bet in terms of our careers, how we bet in terms of our companies and our risk profiles, has to do with this thing I call the uncertainty principle. Very simple. I've been talking about it for years now, in fact, over a decade. The fundamentals are that the greater the uncertainty and the opportunity in the market. Notice how I said uncertainty and opportunity, because the two are synonymous. Uncertainty and opportunity tend to parallel each other. When uncertainty goes up, opportunity also increases. Over time, as uncertainty and opportunity increase, the time to respond to each successive opportunity decreases. Why is this a technology discussion then? Because the only way that you can keep pace with that ever-closing window of time to take advantage of the opportunity is with the right technology. Now, it's a chicken and egg game, I grant you. The reason the window is getting smaller is because of technology, but the only way to keep up with it is because of technology as well. So the question I always ask myself when I look at any technology is does it help me to take advantage of the uncertainty principle? Does it help me to move quicker to seize the opportunity while it's still there? And I'll give you an illustration of this. Sanjeev talked about Peter Drucker. One of the first conversations I had with Drucker, so many years ago, on the back of a napkin, I plotted out this little XY coordinate system as a result to a question I asked of him. And I said, what do you think has changed most over the course of your lifetime from an organizational standpoint? And his response was that we've moved from an ownership culture where one person, one entity owned a product, to a culture that is driven entirely by strategy, where no product is owned by any one organization. And we've moved from a product to a service. And if you think about this, so the classic model of Ford, Henry Ford wanted to own the entire supply chain, right from the rubber tree plants all the way up to the showrooms, to sort of the contemporary Dell model, which really made popular the whole notion of this virtual network of suppliers. What's changed is this notion of uncertainty and volatility in how we bring a product to the marketplace. Because there is no such thing as a single product anymore. It's all customizable. It's all personalized. And there's no such thing as ownership anymore. Connections. How does technology help you to deal with those connections, help you to innovate through them, and to do it in a way that, frankly, is entirely in the cloud, where there is no single point of ownership, no single product that you can point to. It's a difficult thing to do, and you know, I think we're just beginning to understand what that means. And again, I'll prove it to you. I've talked a lot about uncertainty, but I'm not sure we know what uncertainty really is. So I'll ask you, submit to me a game, a board game, a sports game, whatever kind of game that you think epitomizes uncertainty. What would that game be? Submit a few for me. What would it be? Chutes and ladders. He's got young kids. I remember that game well. What else? Chess. Chess always comes up. What else? Monopoly. Monopoly comes up all the time. What else? Marriage. Did someone say marriage? Risk. Risk. Absolutely. Risk. What else? Roulette. Of course. Games of chance. I mean, all of these are, the classics. Card games, chess, roulette, casino games. Casino games are not games of uncertainty. The casino is quite sure they're not games of uncertainty, in fact. Right? Because the casino never loses. None of these are games of uncertainty. Why? They're games of probability. Thank you. They're games of probability. Probability has rules. Uncertainty doesn't. You want a game of uncertainty? Play chess with a 3-year-old, where the king can leave the board, go in the other room, and not come back until you give up. That's a game of uncertainty. Any private pilots in the room? There's got to be a few of you, right? So I remember so vividly, as we all do, but as a private pilot especially, seeing the gaping hole of that first plane in the World Trade Center tower. I remember it so vividly. And the reason I remember it is because I thought to myself in that moment of complete uncertainty, some, idiot in a Cessna probably flew into the World Trade Center. What a stupid thing to do. The rules were not in my rule book that this could be an act of terror. They weren't in my rule book. That's uncertainty. And what happens when you are thrust into uncertainty is predictable, completely predictable. Because let's say we're playing a game of, poker, right? Carlos, you and I are playing poker. And you've got 4 aces in your hand. And it's time to show our hands, and I show mine first. And I happen to have an ace in my hand. And we're playing with one deck, by the way. Carlos looks at my hand, and his first thought is, Tom's cheating. Tom's cheating. I've got 4 aces. It's not possible. You blame someone else. Then Carlos looks at me and says, that Tom, he looks like an honest guy. Carlos's second thought is, it's a bad deck. It's a bad deck. Something's wrong with the system, all right? Something's wrong with the system. Then Carlos realizes we just broke the seal on this deck. His third thought is, let me look at my hand. Maybe I'm to blame. Uncertainty puts you through those 3 stages every single time you experience, right? Someone else is to blame. It's Madoff. He's the culprit. The system, the whole damn thing's at fault. It's me. I should have invested more wisely. Uncertainty always puts you through that, and that is a very stressful experience for all of us collectively, and we're going through it on an ongoing basis. I mean, these crises that we're experiencing are crises of this uncertainty principle. We haven't built the mechanisms by which to keep up with the complexity of the markets that we've created. Sophisticated financial instruments that no one understands, even those who created the damn instrument. They just don't get it. Complexity on top of complexity. It is a difficult and stressful period for everyone. And we have to understand this notion of uncertainty as something that we cannot control, but which we can survive. And if you talk to folks in the military about this, this is becoming part of the doctrine of the military, is how do you teach soldiers to survive in this theater of uncertainty? And it is as difficult for them as it is for us. And it is, I think, our last mile problem, right? This is the colloquial last mile problem. How do we cross that last mile? And the answer always is you don't cross it with the same tools, technologies, behaviors that got you there. We need something different. And it's not just a tool, it's something different in how we behave, in how we look at the world. And part of this is that we have to really finally understand that we're going to have to set aside a lot of the success, or what's led to the success of the past, the rules that have brought us success, and start to re-engage with the marketplace on perhaps an entirely new set of rules and terms. And I know when I say that, you think, boy, Tom, that's a lot of dogma. I mean, what does that really mean? I'll show you what it means, because I'm very tactile about these concepts. I want to reduce them to the most simplistic images so that you take away from this session some things that are actionable, that you can actually use when you go back to your organization. Success has its perils, especially for large organizations. I said at the outset, the engines of innovation are small companies, and mostly I want small companies that don't know success. They don't know what the rules are. They break them because they haven't experienced them. Large companies don't do that all the time. And here's the proof. Don't take your eyes off the screen until I tell you to, right? I want you to look at the girl here, and I'm going to ask you a couple of questions. If she's spinning clockwise, raise your hand. If she's spinning clockwise, raise your hand. Raise them high. Okay, about half. If she's spinning counterclockwise, raise your hand. Don't take your eyes off her. Isn't that wild? Right down the middle. If she's spinning both ways, oscillating back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, raise your hand. Okay? About 15%. I mean, I don't care how big the group is. I've done this with groups up to 5,000 people. It's always the same split. You get about 15 who are undecided. Don't take your eyes off the image. I'm not done yet, okay? And the rest pretty well split into clockwise and counterclockwise. Here's what I want you to do. If she was spinning clockwise for you, change the spin to counterclockwise. If she was spinning counterclockwise, change the spin to clockwise. If you can change the spin, From one to the other, raise your hand. About 20%. About 20% or so. Isn't that amazing? Why can't you change the spin? She's not spinning, by the way. All you're seeing is silhouettes. They look the same from the back to the front. There is no inherent spin in this. But once you set your eyes on her, you can't change the spin by and large. I'll give you a clue. The younger the demographic, the easier it is to change the spin. The older the demographic, the tougher it is to change the spin. You do this with a bunch of high schoolers, they can pretty much change the spin at will. They don't have much trouble with it. The older you get, the harder it is. Why? It's a success factor. Why can't you change the spin? Because what we have up here are pattern matching engines. That's what they do really, really well. And once you establish a pattern, you stick to it. You live with it. So it's your first day on the job with XYZ Corp. We've hired 1,000 new people. You're all in the room. Welcome to XYZ. You know, the success that we've achieved here is due to one overriding point of view. The girl spins clockwise. And you think to yourself, she's not spinning clockwise for me. Should I speak up? But, you know, you value your job. You want to stick it out a little bit, so you don't say anything. Next day you come to work. A coworker says, hey, Tina, what'd you think about that clockwise spinning girl? Pretty good, huh? And Tina thinks, she's still not spinning clockwise for me. Not yet. A week goes by. A month goes by. How long will it take until you see that girl spinning clockwise? Because it's going to happen. It's going to happen or you're not going to last. Success reinforces the pattern. So you ask yourself, how in the world could a company like Google dethrone a Microsoft? It couldn't happen. Boy, it looks more and more likely every day, doesn't it? Why? Because these patterns become gospel. They become sacred. And once they do, you're in trouble. It's nearly impossible to innovate at that point. It's funny, I'm looking at the faces here. A lot of you are still trying to change the direction of spin. I can tell. You are, right? You're trying to change it. You say, I'm going to change the direction of the spin. Darn it, I'm going to do it. Don't feel bad. It is the way we're wired. And ultimately, it's not force of will that causes us to innovate. It is disruption. We need disruption. As large organizations, we need it. As small organizations, we need it. Disruption is ultimately the only way that you can innovate your way out of that conundrum. And I'll show you again the framework to think about this. If you look at any company, any new product, any new category of technology, over time, what happens is as the company becomes more successful, that line that's going up, the flexibility that company has goes down. So you have less latitude to change as time goes on. Real simple principle, right? But my question to you is, so how do you change? And when do you change? I mean, do you wait until you're GM in the rightmost segment of this to change? It's a tough time to change. I mean, I'm not saying it's impossible, but it's a tough time to change. The best time to change is to disrupt that process early in the cycle. And I'm going to give you a great example from my friends at Cisco in just a little bit of how they did that. You have to architect disruption into the organization. And that is a tough thing for most companies to do. That is part of your role. Architect disruption into the organization. Because that way you can create sustainable innovation. Without that disruption, success in and of itself will not create sustainable innovation.